Hello, everyone, and welcome to the month ahead. This is our Rebirth monthly tune in to the month of March. And this isn't a significant month, I think, for a number of reasons. Not only because of it being eclipse season, if we just think about what elementally and energetically is happening in the month of March in terms of what we're all holding, um, collectively and individually. We have the month beginning with this Moon Uranus opposition, right? So whenever we have oppositions or squares, we're going to be looking to the empty sign for release, right? So in this case, we have a loose square of Venus to Uranus, and she's making a T square where she's at the top of the T, and here we have the moon in Scorpio, exactly opposite right now as I'm recording this, you know. So there's a lot of strong energy in that signature. What is Uranus? Uranus is ruled by Venus in the sign of Taurus. And, what we would call they're in a mutual reception to one another because Venus is ruled by Uranus in the sign of Aquarius. And that indicates to me that they're energetically working in harmony, in what we would call a symbiotic relationship, right? Liberation and breakthroughs are intrinsically tied to our feeling of ground and embodiment in our physical being. And it's kind of contradictory because Uranus often has a energetic of being dissociative, right? Separating consciousness from the body. In some cases, that can be a really beautiful thing. It can be a really powerful thing to be a witness of your life, of the earth, to hold witness consciousness to what's happening. And in other instances, it can be a form of protection, right? If we're in a traumatic state, we have a trauma to the body, whether it's a car accident or sexual trauma, physical trauma, the body, the spirit, and the soma has a protective mechanism of separating itself from the physical reality for protection. What is it protecting? The ego, right? The ego consciousness, our identity, our identification with form. And as we're undergoing changes in our life, in our physical environment, in our relationships, in our emotional body, in our resources, that sort of being disassociated can be both helpful and a hindrance, right? It can be a prior coping mechanism that we've never really restored a relationship to ourselves post or traumatic situation in a way that allows us to be able to unpack and unwind what's happening, right? If we look at the things in our life that have to change, right? And I'm talking about March from a perspective of that it, by its very nature, the month of March is a transitional month, right? If we look 1 month ahead, we just skip ahead to the month of April, we have Aries, right? Cardinal. Come back to the present moment here. What are we in? Pisces, mutable. So March is the initiation time into Aries, which is spring in the northern hemisphere, and fall in the southern hemisphere. A cardinal season, a season that begins life, right? Or ends cycles in particular. We're ending a mutable cycle. And this mutable cycle is an important one because all beings on the planet need a season of grief in order to turn into a season of initiation. We need for rain to come down and nourish the earth. We need to cry. We need to release. We need for a period of sickness, illness, being close to that which is in pain in our physical bodies, in our lives, that which is dissolving, that which is struggling and suffering to be met, right? And we can't have a breakthrough around what we suffer with until we have suffered with it, and until we've been with it enough. And that this mutable season of Pisces really gives us that. It gives us that perspective that the poets and the lovers and the artists, the greatest artists in the world, the greatest poets in the world, the greatest writers in the world, the greatest musicians in the world are the ones who have really been with their suffering. They're the alcoholics, the drug addicts, they're those who have suffered abuse, who have had physical pain and limitations, and they haven't, transcended it to these awakened states. They have transmuted it within their own lives into an art. They've taken their emotional pain and created words that inspire. They've taken the longing for love and connection in their life and made it into music, into song that has created a ripple effect in the hearts of people. They've taken their desire to be connected to source, their devotion and love, and made it something that inspires the heart when we witness it, when we see it, when we hear it, when we feel it. And this is such a necessary part of the human condition of our suffering, is that we take our suffering and we make our suffering mean something, right? Pisces is the great meaning of life, the great meaning of the cosmos, right? Chiron and Chariklo, his wife, right? They're the great medicine makers. They are making medicine with the pain of their struggle. And in fact, their relationship, their coming together, did something for humanity, right? This is the great challenge of Mars Venus, right? At this time in a new phase with Pluto. How does the great coming together of our relationship inspire a change in humanity that allows us all to grow, right? Where we call for partnership that is built on mutual love and respect and equality, that is rooted in a deep devotion to our source and our creator, that is anchored in the deep intimacy that is only forged out of trust, that comes from vulnerability, that comes from you seeing my shadow and loving me still. Do you see my shadow and love me still? Do you know my limitations and my weaknesses as a human being? Do you know the parts of me that are afraid of being abandoned and betrayed? And do you love me still? These are the questions that we have to walk with in our evolutionary journey. And the grief that we find of being alone, of being lonely, of feeling the ache of the heart in loss, of feeling the desires that only faith can hold for us, but that we don't yet have the faith to hold us in. And maybe we do. Maybe we're forming that faith from within, formed. Maybe we're forging the heart muscles, the capacity to feel strong and, capable, right? This is the square. The square is the crisis of consciousness. And what's the square right now in these days, in these coming days, these first few days of March? The square is a Venus to Uranus. All the places where we're still yet to break through and form a new sense of identity and creative purpose. And what I was talking about at the beginning here, where is the empty space? Well, in this square, the other signs are Leo and Scorpio, right? We have the square is in the Uranus ruled sign of Aquarius and the Venus ruled sign of Taurus, right? So there's tension. The square brings tension, and tension always builds us into a position of change because we have to move in one direction or another. And what I would say that these squares are inviting us into the change of our creative self-expression and our intimate expression. In really reflecting on these changes, I was asking myself the question in meditation this morning, what do I need to do to get my life ready and moving in the right direction? Right? Because with a square, we're building with the movement of pressure. There's pressure building into the square, especially as we're moving into the square. And right behind Venus making this square in the first couple of days is Mars. And with Mars, I notice we always feel the pressure building in the leading time before the exact, as opposed to the aftermath. And so in the direction of building life and love, right? We have to do things that are going to align us with a lot, and this has a lot to do with alignment, align us with the vision, the perception, the clarity, the framework, the ideas that are liberated from our norm, breaking free, moving outside of what feels socially acceptable. And it has to do with what building blocks, what frameworks in the earth, in our embodiment, in our physical resources, in our financial resources. I've been thinking a lot about the changes in our financial resources. It's interesting. I'm feeling really called to this particular deck. So for picking a card for our month ahead. And the guidance that I got in my meditation was that there are 4 things we have to do as a part of this square, as a part of this question of readying our life to move in the right direction, because the square is going to break up that energy so that we can do what Mars is coming through in the days after, so that we can do what is necessary to move. Mars is going to want to move. Instinctively, that movement, if it's stifled, especially as the moon comes around to closing this cycle, instinctively, if we are not actively moving that energy in the direction of change, we are going to feel the impulse to F it, to F it, to fight, to F the other F, to fornicate, to be free, the other F, to, and what's the last F? And the most important F, especially as we're in the sign of Aquarius, where we might not otherwise be doing this last F, to feel it, right? To feel it. So to fight it, to fuck it. Sorry. Oh, God, are they gonna? I hope they don't. Well, hopefully they don't blank me on the YouTube. To F it, to fornicate it, to feel it, and to free it. One of I actually got 4 messages in terms of the month ahead. Feeling, to keep inviting us to feel our needs, to feel our desires, to share those needs and desires, but also to feel. In particular, this would be feeling the pain, the suffering, the struggle. And the purpose of feeling is to remain in touch with the physical body so that we are in touch with what needs to move through the physical body. Feeling, the second one was surrender, right? Surrender, because really what is happening here are waves of change. Pisces season are the waves of change, the waves of grief, the waves of emotion that are literally going to move us through the blockages to love, to compassion, that are literally going to move us through the pain that has been suppressed in our physical body, that is causing illness, that is causing discomfort. And emotional pain isn't the discomfort that we fear. It's actually facing what meaning we have made of that discomfort. So when we can bring the feeling up without having to make meaning about it, they're just feelings. They're not stories. They may have been made into stories. They may be linked to stories. You see, Mercury is here with Neptune. In these couple of days here, Mercury is making the conjunction to Neptune. So all the stories we have about our past hurts, our pains, about the places where we've been struggling and suffering, these are also the places of our deepest inspiration. Take them to your poetry. Make a story about them in the sand and let the water wash it away. Make a love song, crying out to God for renewal, for healing. Make a devotion to the deepest part of yourself for healing, especially in these last days as we close this Pisces lunar cycle. So that was the other ones. The next is strength, right? With Uranus and Jupiter in Taurus. Our expansion of our ability to heal is in direct proportion to our expansion of our ability to feel. And as those things happen to be moving in proportion to one another, to be challenging one another, it ultimately challenges our physical well-being, our physical strength. And so our ability to strengthen our bodies, to be in touch with our bodies as we feel the things we feel, is directly in proportion to our ability to receive the new information, new guidance, new feelings, new experiences, right? And especially as it relates to the discomfort that we felt, whether it's anxiety, fear, loneliness, woundedness, brokenness, those feelings themselves are actually the direct indications of our wholeness. I'm just like, I feel a lot of joy and emotion when I feel that. They are the indications of our wholeness. They are the extent to which we can feel that is actually the indication of the return of our joy, the return of our well-being, the return of our peace. This is the good news. It's like somehow in the mess and the muck, that's where we see the lotus blossom, right? We see the blossoming of our unbrokenness, our resilience, our power, our strength, right? Our strength. And then the next is our devotion, right? Our devotion happens through daily prayer, meditation, rest, and reflection, right? These places of renewing ourselves in connection to our source. So these are the 4 things that I got in order to ready our lives for moving in the right direction. And what is the right direction? It's the direction that's most aligned with our soul's path. How do we know that we're moving in the right direction? We feel peace. We feel ease. We feel joy. We feel color returning to our face. We feel our voice returning. It's so interesting in terms of one of the things I noticed in the last couple of days when I use my voice in a way that I hadn't in a long time. I felt this part of me that was like, oh, Michelle, I've been so longing to hear your voice, you know? It was like such a deep and tender part of me realizing how something had been missing. And it's not until something returns that we realize that something was lost. It's not until we recognize the longing for something until we realize how far we've been from it, you know? And those are often the moments when they don't necessarily, it doesn't make sense, right? It's not logical or linear. They just sort of arise out of our awareness and being with what we are feeling in the present moment. And so as we move through this week, this Friday, March 8th, this is the first day of my new class series, The Goddess Within. And I'm really excited to be beginning this class series because it's an opportunity to dive into the archetypal feminine. And we have, you know, all of the goddesses really strong and present in this particular time. Excuse me. I had every intention of beginning the class series with the goddess Hygeia, but one of the things I noticed, and I'm going to put this out to my students, you can tell me, in talking with Ari about the goddesses, you know, and I really attune to who's most present and alive, right? We have Chariklo, who is in Aquarius. She's been traveling with Venus and Mars. We have Hygeia, who's in Pisces. She's been traveling with Saturn. She's moving towards Neptune right now. We have Ceres, the mother goddess, who's in Capricorn, and she's actually moving to square the nodes this month. And that's a significant, you know, with any square, and especially squares to the nodes, that's a significant turning point in that particular archetype. We have Lilith and Pallas Athene, who have been traveling through the sign of Sagittarius. And we have Juno, who's retrograde in the sign of Virgo. And Saturn is moving to oppose Juno. And then we have Vesta, who's in the sign of Gemini, only for a little bit longer, but before she moves into Cancer. And so, you know, my initial schedule was kind of thinking Hygeia. I would work with Hygeia, and then Vesta, you know, and then, but I'm really open, actually, especially with Ceres moving into the square to the nodes, working with Ceres. Then Hygeia actually moves into Aries, and she'll be moving towards, you know, towards Chiron. So you tell me, I'll let my students vote. It's a very interesting month here. Both are very important and strong signatures. Then on Sunday, we have this new moon in Pisces. And the new moon is always a time of new beginning, right? So I'm going to go back so that you can see this new moon, because it's a really, you know, Excuse me. It's a healing moon. It's at 20 degrees of Pisces. It's so just before the new moon, in the dark time of the moon will conjoin with Saturn, right? And we've been working with Saturn in Pisces, which Saturn in Pisces is really inviting us into this transitional state. And the transitional state is the state of where our beliefs and our ideas, the beliefs and the ideas being the square to Sagittarius and Gemini, and the deep purification, the intention of our lives is in a state of change because we are realigning ourselves with a deeper source. And in that, we are facing the pain and the challenges of this human life, the crisis, the loss of faith, and the development of a connection to something larger than us, right? Whenever anyone comes into a crisis point, whether it's, with a physical illness, if there's alcoholism or drug addiction, right? When you come to the end of your rope, there's a moment of surrender, of really giving oneself up to the grace. And in that process of letting go, we feel we are losing something, but actually we're gaining everything. All of a sudden, we're being carried by a force that is greater than us. We're being healed by something, by allowing what is not healing, what is not healthy, what is not well to go. The addiction itself is being given to a power that can do something that we have not been able to do for ourselves. The loss, the grief that we feel is being surrendered into the ocean of feeling so that our hearts can be renewed. So that, so with this particular new moon, I feel there's an immense power for our capacity to receive, to be renewed. And what's so interesting is that this, Juno opposite Saturn perfects at this time. And Juno is the goddess of commitment, and Saturn has so much to do with our long-term commitment, our devotion and our commitment to everything. And I was thinking about it this morning, that the one relationship that we have for a lifetime is the one that we have to ourselves and to our source, to our creator. That is the most primary relationship, and it is the most foundational relationship. It is the one that always goes with us. Even our parents die, our partners come and go, they change. Even if we stay in a relationship, like some people get, into a relationship and they're in it, right? That relationship is going to undergo many phases. You are going to have the many faces of your own relationship to yourself. Periods of connection, periods of joy, periods of health, periods of well-being, right? Sometimes we get to share those periods with others. Sometimes for a long time, the same person is with us in those periods, and we may or may not feel actually connected to them. We may or may not feel actually connected to ourselves. But I see this, Pisces new moon as a going inward into that deepest source of connection, into that deepest well, and really renewing our sense of hope, spiritual faith, optimism, and we're going to be coming together on Sunday. This new moon perfects in the early hours, but 10 a.m. Sunday morning is when we'll be in. Anyone who participates in any of my classes, my programs, my mentorship is automatically included as a part of my monthly new moon ceremonies. So we'll be coming together to pray. And this is such a beautiful time of prayer and renewal. It's such a beautiful time where we can really enter into the sacred sacrament of being with ourselves, the sacred commitment to renewing our relationship to ourselves. And from that relationship, all other relationships are fed. All other relationships originate. All other relationships begin. So even if we're desiring to begin new relationships, even if we're readying or preparing ourselves to welcome new relationships into our lives, this is the first step. This is the beginning place where we enter into that relationship. Even if we're renewing a relationship that is a very long-term relationship, there's no better thing that we can do in a long-term relationship than make it a new relationship. Renew those vows, renew that commitment, renew that. And we do that by clearing the past. We do that by getting current with ourselves, with our feelings, by being honest and transparent and vulnerable in the ways that we can. And right after this new moon, Mercury enters the sign of Aries, which Mercury's next retrograde cycle will be in the sign of Aries with the North Node and with, and it's not very far off from when that will be beginning. So we have also an initiation of Aries season that is coming, and Mercury is the precursor to that initiation in this cycle. So then in the coming days ahead, the moon moves in its first light into the sign of Aries, and we get a conjunction. And you know, the sign of Aries is ruled by Mars. Mars is currently just beyond its square to Uranus. So it's like that, all that existential push that we might feel to be getting our lives moving in a new direction is also going to be requiring us to take action in our communication. And this is a really beautiful thing that we can learn how to utilize that Mars energy conscientiously. Because one of the limitations of Mars is it's instinctive. And so it can be saying things or doing things instinctually, which then hurt others, right? Which then cause problems or harm. And a part of how we're learning to work with that energy is to learn how to stabilize our reactiveness within a new consciousness, within a new way of thinking. So that takes time, that takes discipline and practice. It takes self-restraint. And that self-restraint is a place where we're learning. You know, we're learning how to harness our courage, our determination, our will, our energy, our life force, our drive, and not to harness it from a place of, oh, I'm alienating myself, I don't belong, right? All those outsiderness ideas, but to harness it from a place of, oh yeah, like I am in charge of the breakthrough inside of me. I am instinctively responsible for the desires that are happening inside of me. And then what I do with them and how I use them are my responsibility. And that's where my power truly lies, because then I can think not as if I have to move away from a relationship in order to have what I desire, or that I need to use my power or force in order to control or dominate others, but that I can actually liberate my own energy for what I desire, for the values that I have, and not forget that the other side of that is relationship, right? The other side of Aries is Libra, is connection. And as all these planets are moving towards the North Node, we're closing out the cycle where the South Node has been the resolution node for the square. So each of these planets, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Saturn, the Sun, at some point over the last 6 months, they came through, or even over the last couple of years. Saturn would have been a while back, but they came through and they squared the nodal axis. And when they did that, the resolution node became the South Node because it was the last node that they had conjoined with, that they had made a conjunction to. But as they're all moving towards the North Node, we're finding the culmination of that square, of that challenge. And we're going to be beginning a new cycle with the North Node. This month, that new cycle will, originate with Mercury. And Mercury's retrograde period will be a big part of that. So we could look back and see, well, when did Mercury square the nodes? And what was happening in our life at that time? What was significant? What's important about this time is that it's coming to a full culmination. And it's coming full circle in a time as we're preparing for the first of the next set of eclipses, right? So here's Mercury joining with the North Node at 15 degrees, happening in the middle of March. Mars is still in the sign of Aquarius, but Venus has moved into the sign of Pisces, and she's moving towards a conjunction with Saturn. She's moving towards an opposition with Juno, right? So if we're in relationships that have been long-term, we're moving towards those real renewals of contracts. And those renewals might have come as a result of really reflecting on what we desire in our life, what we need, what our core calling, if we derive ultimate meaning and purpose, especially from our relationships, this will make these transits even more significant. Because if our meaning and purpose is not derived from our source or from our sense of self, but from the relationship itself, then the disillusionment, the grief, the loneliness, the desires will be that much more intensified as a part of this Pisces season, right? And then we have the first day of spring. I don't want to skip that. 0 degrees Aries, or the first day of fall in the Southern Hemisphere, March 20th. And this is the beginning of the initiation season. But we can really recognize we're already being initiated because Mercury led the way with the North Node while we were in that Pisces season. And the initiation is being given a very specific focus because Mercury is now joining with Chiron. Chiron is the wounded healer. And a part of that archetype, while it both has to do with the wounds that we are healing from, it also includes the wounds that we have created, that have been created by us. And these wounds, whether they are initiated by war, violence, whether they are initiated by our instinctual self-will, right? Our self-will, when not aligned with God's will, can hurt and harm others. And our self-will, when aligned with our own personal desires, focused on our creative actualization, can create beautiful things, right? It can initiate beautiful relationships and connections. Our desires, when they're coming from the place of recognition that what we create impacts the whole, that we are interconnected and interdependent, really. There isn't anything that you do, from shopping at the grocery store, filling up your gas tank, driving your kids, or taking care of a family member, praying, sweeping your floor, doing your laundry. There's nothing, making art, making love, playing with children, laughing, feeling depressed, being angry. There is nothing that we do that isn't separate, that is separate. I'm sorry, that is separate entirely from the whole. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Everything, every word that we speak, every thought that we think, every deed that we do has an effect on the whole. And when we know that we are love, when we recognize our interconnection and our interdependence on everyone and everything else, when we see that our healing of our physical body is directly connected to the healing of our emotional body, when we see that our creative expression and our ways that we can inspire and empower others and ourselves come not from the things that we have or the things that we buy or the ways that we are good enough, but from exactly our fallibility, our imperfections, our messiness, our hurts and our hards, our hard won truths, of the things that we desire to give birth to, the things that we want to create, that they want us to, that the people that we want to love, the partners that we dream of or desire, the relationships, the callings for divine love and union. These are all part of a greater healing of the whole of humanity, of which we are a part of and we can never be separate from. So when we recognize that, then something happens. Prayers get answered. We all of a sudden get the grace of being able to let go of the thing that we haven't been able to let go of, that we want to let go of, that we know is wanting us to let go of it. And then something new can emerge. And this season of Aries season is instinctual newness, but you can see Mars is at the 28th degree. Mars is still culminating. And then right after the spring equinox comes this 0 degrees Pisces. So, for all my friends out there with any Virgo, Pisces stelliums, whether it's Pluto in Virgo or a lot of Pisces stuff, Chiron in Pisces, your initiation period, right? This instinctual initiation of your own healing also comes with these activations of the creative gifts, writing poetry, writing love songs, singing, painting, dancing, praying, right? Feeling our pain, healing our pain, taking ourselves to the water, to the ocean, right? Being close to our grief, not for it to swallow us up, but for it to kiss our face like salty tears, to feel the commitment that aches to be made in our bones as a part of our inner being. Oh, that one. Wow, that one gets me. The longing for belonging, my friends. The longing for belonging. you know, so this particular time, potent medicine making time, even if there is or has been like a really strong desire to get things going, to be initiating things, we will be working at the pace of water, right? Waves of rushing, moving, waves changing and dissolving and renewing. And this is really, it's an opportunity, really, for us to get out of our own way in a big way, because that preparation is for eclipse season. Now, in these couple of days here, pay attention. Pay attention very closely to what's happening, what's beginning. I always think it's a good thing, for us to be paying attention to what's happening in our lives, but in particular, because these are like special little windows. And I see this particular window, this eclipse, is more like a stained glass window. It's not a clear window. This is a penumbral eclipse. I'll be teaching a class on eclipses for my students. If you're in one of my class series, if you're in my mentoring group, or if you're in, I'll be teaching a class that I'm also going to be teaching for the Astrology Collective later on in April. But, one of the things that comes in during eclipses are relationships, important relationships. Important relationships can come in and out. Actually, it's not just in, but it can be out. And here we have both Mars and Venus in the sign of Pisces. They're ruling the nodes. I mean, Venus ruling the south node there with the moon, and Mars ruling the north node with Chiron and Mercury. And they're all in the sign of Pisces. They're all in this transitional stage, murky, deeply connected to an intuitive and psychic and otherworldly sense of place. They're all working with this, they've all come through this opposition to Juno. So there's this deeper reevaluation of commitments, conscious commitment, conscious devotion. And then they're all working with Saturn, right? Deep long-term change, with Neptune, deep connected to our healing path. So there's such a rich unfolding here in this first eclipse. And it's like this eclipse, I think, very much harkens to what we are in. A very strange season, my friends, because everything right now, I think, is pointing to a deeper sea and undercurrent of actually the Pisces Virgo nodal shift. But these eclipses are happening on the Libra Aries axis. So they're happening in a cardinal state with such a mutable energy of transmutation. Is that a word? It's not transmutation that I'm trying. It's literally like what happens to water when it changes form from ocean to ice to salt to sea to tears to vapor to mold, right? All these different forms, water can take all to steam, can change so much. It affects so much. Water is life. It is literally connected to all life. There's no form of life. We emerge from water, right? Pisces is the 12th house. It's in astrology, in the natural zodiac. It pertains to the deep unconscious. The 12th house has and holds all these secrets, right, of what comes from the mystery. Where do we come from? Where do we go? These deeper questions, holding all of it in the hands of meaning and purpose, our divine purpose, especially. We have this March 25th eclipse, and then we have in April an eclipse. And then we have in September an eclipse, and then in October an eclipse. So these are the eclipses of the year, and I'll be teaching them in my upcoming eclipse class. But a part of what I'm going to be teaching on this class is the nature of relationships that are connected to eclipses, because we have souls where there's a connection at the nodal points. And nodal connections are the most karmic dynamics, right? This is parents and children, but also soulmate relationships can have these nodal connections. They can happen whether an eclipse is happening or not, but especially when they are initiated by an eclipse, this sort of like an amplification of the core soul dynamic and purpose between two people. And it's one of the things that I want to explore in this upcoming class series. It's not a, this is a one-time class, but then, and the goddess class is a class series. So there's all kinds of information on my website about both of these. And if you are interested in joining me, I definitely invite you to sign up. There will be links in the description of this video to both of those. And, you know, when we are going through any kind of initiation of sorts, we can't necessarily see. That's why I feel like this is more of like a stained glass window. It creates a beautiful image. It is very fractal in its nature. Different pieces of glass come together to create one image, right? It is very devotional in its nature too. It's really pointing us to something within us that has to be illuminated as a part of our soul's journey. And it's deeply healing to be in the presence of. And what seems incomplete, right, is complete, right? That's what I was saying earlier about our wholeness in our brokenness, actually. Like it's an illusion that we're broken or hurt or wounded human beings. We're actually very whole, holy human beings. And we've been created that way and designed that way. And if we imagine the soul's journey as, you know, creating each of us in this particular way, then there's something coming in at this eclipse. And we might have seen a precursor of it if you're listening to my week ahead from last week, when the moon was in Libra last month, February 26th, right? Something healing, something that we were wanting, something that we were praying for, maybe now coming to fruition or now revealing itself, another step along the path, you know, but further along than before. And then each time now, as Pluto's in the sign of Aquarius, that the moon moves through that Scorpio channel, it's going to be making a square to Pluto. And in this case, also that a trine to Mars. So we're that place where the shadow is being released inside of our consciousness, whether it's in what we perceive as the other, which is a lot of the time where our shadow is triggered, is when we're seeing that in others. Whatever feelings are being elicited, we have to remain responsible for the fact of the presence of those feelings being within us, regardless of whether we can project blame or responsibility onto another, or judgment, or saying like, oh, they did something that hurt us, right? Which could be true to some extent. But what we're experiencing is within us. And of course, by all means, our choice, our agency, our action, and our responsibility to heal is within us. We can't put that on somebody else. If we're waiting for somebody else to heal us, we will be waiting a lifetime to be healed. If we're waiting on ourselves to choose that healing, this is the time to be doing it. Now, now, right now, right now in the, closing phase, the beginning of the month, right now in the wherever we are, wherever you are when you're listening to this, now is the best time to choose to be committed to your own healing journey. Now is the best time to be taking responsibility for your feelings and how you show up in relationship. Now is the best time to be reclaiming your power from maybe places where it was given, or calling it all back. One of the things that I do regularly in my life when I need that is I find a shaman. There are shamans um, who walk with integrity. If you need help finding someone or knowing where to go, reach out to me. I can think of people to recommend. Um, but I find a shaman and I specifically go to them to reclaim the lost soul parts, right? To call all of myself back to me for the purpose of healing. And then um, the shaman I worked with most recently, he had me calling all those parts back into this heart, which I've been carrying with me. I took it on my pilgrimage to France. I've blessed it in the waters. It's like, it's a reflective, and he worked with me and blowing into those parts. It's really a blessing to have someone like that. So if you need someone like that, let me know. If you, you know, you don't have to have someone to work with, a healer, to heal yourself, to create a ritual for yourself. And these particular times are really beautiful times to be really nurturing and tending to your own rituals and your own rhythms, creating your own, in my monthly new moon ceremony, we do a ritual prayer practice together. We we share in healing together because that's how we heal. We heal together. So I hope that you'll join me this month. We end the month with this Scorpio moon, which is how we began the month, right? We begin the month with the Scorpio moon, and then we get to the end of March here in the Sagittarius moon time. And the interesting thing about the transition from Scorpio to Sagittarius is that it starts to activate from the trine, the water trine, to all that Pisces stuff, to the square. And again, we get into that crisis where whatever we're doing to heal along this path and this journey, and then, Hygeia also moves into the sign of Aries. So she's now ruled by Mars, but Mars is still in Pisces. Whatever we're doing on our healing journey has to be evoking ultimately a shift in our belief systems. And that shift in our belief systems is what's going to bring us closer to the truth, right? Truth with a capital T. This is the transition from beliefs where we're believing with faith to beliefs where it's not even where it's truth that's emerging from within us and our own experience, our own direct experience, where it's truth that is coming from our inherent freedom, our wildness, and the reclaiming of those parts inside of us, right? Lilith is in Sagittarius. That liberation of the wild feminine has to do with unconditioning those belief systems from dogma, from religious ideas, from suppression, from puritanical belief systems that have persecuted and suppressed the feminine, right? There's a reclaiming of our voice from those places where we were simply being healers. We were healing ourselves before people judged us as being witches or evil and then burned us, right? We were healing our children, our families. We were in touch with a deeper truth that came from within us as a natural knowing of our connection to source and life force, right? That life force that grows life inside of us. Before we were being sold ideas that disconnected us from that life force, right? So there's a real reckoning with those things as we come through this month that might be challenging a lot of ideas. So, my friends, I picked a couple of cards for the month ahead. Um, Interestingly enough, I got this calling to pick from the Messages from Your Angels cards, which was from Doreen Virtue, and she went through a big rebirth as a soul. She's become very deeply devoted to Jesus, and her path is in Christianity. She's rejected a lot of what she originally believed in. It's a very interesting thing to watch. And sometimes I wonder, is that going to happen to me? Like, I don't know. I don't know. I know that my love of Jesus continues to deepen and my devotion, but I can't seem to find myself in any orthodox or fundamentalist belief system either, because any part of the unconditional love of God that casts anyone out or anything out doesn't seem to make sense to me inside in my inner truth. But anyway, I will read you this card because they all can seem to be pointing to a similar theme. And then I picked a card from Kara Elizabeth's Animal Apothecaries card, and the card is Prayers Answered. And I think a part of what we're cultivating in this time is like the real patience of the transitional phases. Those transitional times, like, they tend to be the hardest times for me. I know personally. I want to be on the other side. I want to be healed. I want to be healthy. I want to be whole in my mindset. I want to have the thing, I want the manifestation. The transition phase of like dissolving and becoming and like the discomfort of the unknown, those are the harder waves of change to ride, you know. But it says here, yes, this is the right timing for this new venture. A happy outcome follows your positive expectation. The answer is that everything you hope for, it's still a good idea to keep your eyes open and pray for assistance along the way. Maybe there are required adjustments. Anyway, I don't want to read this whole thing, but it says, take heart in following your guidance, right? I think when we're sort of being carried along by grace, guidance doesn't always make logical, linear sense. And like, for example, I followed the inner guidance I had around creating the Rebirth program. And I kept feeling something relative to that program. And I asked the I Ching a couple of times. I got really positive guidance to keep going. And then in a moment in the last week, one of the participants realized that she couldn't participate for her own personal reasons. And it really prompted me to this inner reflection around what I was doing and what I really felt called to do. And what emerged out of that was a decision to just offer private mentorship to those who are still signed up. And that has felt so good to me and so actually aligned with what I actually feel called to do. But it wouldn't have emerged, right? And it required adjustments and change. And a part of that adjustment actually freed up the time in my schedule, which this came before that decision, right? So it's non-linear. It came before that decision, but the decision to offer the goddess class came from my meditation, right? These are intuitive arisings that are coming from within. And it's felt so validating because people are really like ready and jumping in and joining me on this journey. And it feels so right in my being. So the second card is timeout. You've been so busy taking care of everyone else's needs, but now is time to stop and take care of yourself. Well, that's really true. Um, and a part of what I've been really reflecting on is that we have to take time for renewal, rest, replenishment, restoring our connection to ourselves, our connection to source. And And the last card is prayers answered, and it has this beautiful buffalo with the hands and the praying. And it says, the North American Plains buffalo, they revered the buffalo. It was a means for survival, and very little was wasted. Buffalo was life. Sacred dance ceremonies were performed in honor of buffalo, asking for a successful hunt. In these ceremonies, dancers would become the buffalo in spirit. The buffalo lesson is the importance of asking the great mystery for help through syncing your prayers with action to create abundance and success. Act as if your prayers have been answered. When we act as if our prayers have been answered, we become a magnet for those prayers to manifest themselves in physical form. Let's say you experience disunity, having a difficult time with a colleague or a friend or a loved one. I'm just adding all of that. The prayer is to resolve the issue and have unity between you two. Your prayer to the great mystery would be to ask for unity with your coworker and then act as if it had already happened. This would look like being kind and respectful, showing love, extending your care, offering your forgiveness, showing your respect. I'm adding all of that, but this action would create the unity and it eventually dissolve the issue. And I would say, like, a part of what this time is about is like, if the prayer is for something specific, we're dissolving into the way of being that would create this something specific. So it's for healing and health, if it's for a relationship, if it's for resources, if it's for, you know, changes in our relationship, if it's for calling something into our life that has yet to become, it's a dissolving period of becoming what's yet to become. And that is a vulnerable place to be. So, my friends, I wish you so many blessings on this month ahead. And, if you feel called to join me in any way, shape, or form, everything you need to know about what you can join me in is in the description of this video and on my website. You can always book a session with me. My calendar is open for the month of March. And online booking is available directly, or you can book a session in my shop and then email me to schedule if you don't see a time available in my online booking that works for you. So, blessings on your healing journey. Hope that something in this video touched you. As always, leave me your comments. Tell me what's on your heart, what you're feeling, what you're working with, what touched you. Yeah, give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. If you didn't like it, you can have a good day. I really am grateful so much for all of your comments and all of your heartfelt love and sharing. It means the world to me, and grateful to be on this journey with you. Bye for now.